What's up, fungal associates? Welcome to Completely Arbortrary. It's the podcast about trees and other related topics. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Alex Crowson. And of course, I am joined as ever by Mr. Casey Clapp.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, Casey.
It's nice to be back.
Boy, it's been a while, huh?
It feels like it, but it's only been a normal 2 weeks.
Yeah,
we did this 2 weeks ago.
That's right, yeah. We had a bit of a stop down and released a couple fun bonus things.
Just one, right?
Uh-huh.
Oh, thank God. I was like, what did
as
I
far
miss?
as I know.
Casey, you've been gone for weeks.
But Casey, the reason that we did this, well, one, I had COVID, and that was bad.
Yes, and we recorded from afar then. That's actually right. You're right. So we weren't actually in this room.
True, yes. Mm-hmm. And then you had a little bit of a crunch time.
I did.
For your book.
That's right.
You were taking a bunch of photos and editing a bunch of photos and bending over backwards.
Oh my God, to say the least. It was like, Alex, the hardest I have ever worked.
Wow.
And I can't say that in like, he worked really hard and he, got it done. It was mostly that I didn't know how hard it was going to be. And I didn't do it when I should have.
Sure.
Months and months prior. I was like, okay, yeah. I built up all these things. I was ready for it. And then I was like, okay, great. Now I got, 5 weeks to get this done. Oh, okay. All right. And then 1 week was gone. Then I had 4 weeks and then 3. And then in the entire month of September and even the week before, it's like a full 4 weeks. I did nothing but do the research for the podcast, record it with you, leave, and then immediately go out and start taking photos and editing photos and making sure I have everything organized properly, like 20 or 30,000 photos.
This is where we reveal that there never was a book deal, and this is like your Shutter Island.
Yeah, I've just been in my room taking pictures. There's like tree photos up around with like twine between them, connecting all the dots.
Well, Casey, congratulations on being done.
Thank you. At least
I'm happy for a couple of reasons.
Oh yeah. Oh, what's yours?
Well, that you accomplished something, but also I can have you back on the pod here.
Yeah, that's right.
I can't wait for this. I hope this book burns in hell for all the trouble it's cost us.
Yeah. Well, maybe that'd be fun. Turns out it's just like a very evil omen.
Oh yeah,
that'd be nice. Like what are those called?
Are there good omens?
Yeah, of course.
Oh sure, you have a good omen. Yeah.
I think it's just it doesn't. No one ever uses the term that way.
Sure. Yeah.
There was something. It's like an object that has an evil spirit in it, isn't there? There's like a Harry Potter has those.
Oh, like a Horcrux.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe this. I hope this book isn't that, but it'd be kind of fun if it was.
Yeah, we'd have to stab it with a basilisk fang.
Yeah,
if it is.
Standard procedure.
That'll be fun.
I do have one other great thing that I could share.
Yeah, please.
The name of the book.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I told everyone the last time.
Let's hear it, Case.
The Trees Around You.
Yeah.
It's going to be not a guide. I think the subtitle we changed a little bit to say that it is how to learn to identify the common trees around you.
How to learn to identify.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is specific to show that even if you don't know anything about identification, this isn't like a guide where you have to know something beforehand.
Sure.
You can come cold and it will start from the beginning and you'll know how to identify every tree in the greater Pacific Northwest.
I'll say if you're coming cold, you need to talk to your proctologist.
Yes, it's true. Yeah.
Gross.
Oh, a Alex, what? God, you're a mess.
It's to do with the prostate.
If you...
I guess it's more of a testicle thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if that's the right doctor.
Whatever. I don't know how my body works.
Yeah, well, this is something...
I'm coming cold.
We're going to have a talk later.
All right, moving on. Well, gosh, you're full of good news today.
Yeah, things are really coming down for me here.
Coming down? Yeah. Things are really coming down on top of me. I'm coming cold.
I'm coming cold.
Well, hey, everybody. We have got a beautiful tree to talk about today.
Oh, man, do we?
This is actually one of my early favorites, Casey.
Really?
In terms of its fruit.
Yeah. I have it right here on the back of my computer.
That's right. We have a Cone of the Month Club sticker of this cone.
Yes, we do.
We are, of course, today talking about the China-Fir. Now, hold on. It's not the Chinese fir.
This is kind of a thing.
This is a hyphenated China-Fir.
Correct.
Which means...
It's not a real China. It's not a real fir.
Yep, it's false. So we're going to talk about that. Oh, we're going to get into it.
Oh, we're going to get into it.
But first, Casey, did you know that this podcast is run entirely on the blood, sweat, and tears, mostly blood, of our lovely fungal associates who choose to support the show on our completely arbitrary Treemium?
That's right, they do.
That can happen at arbitrarypod.supercast.com. That's ARBORTRARY pod.supercast.com. And there you can sign up to support this podcast. It's either a monthly gift, I should say. We give you a gift in return, or an annual gift, which is a little bit more, but you get the whole year and you get a little bit of a discount.
Exactly.
And with that is included ad-free listening, bonus episodes, 20% off the merch store at all times.
Exactly. Yeah, you can always go in, and you get into the Cone of the Month Club.
That's right, the Cone of the Month Club, where we send you... Actually, it's called the Cone Club.
Oh, sorry. I know we changed it. We made it sleeker.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Facebook. Where we send you monthly cone stickers illustrated by independent artists, all of them beautiful, beautiful people making beautiful, beautiful art.
That's exactly right.
We get them printed on a sticker here locally at Sticker Ninja, and we send them off to you in the physical mailbox. It's a lovely thing to be a part of.
That's right.
And it's the best way to support the podcast.
Meanwhile, the other big news that we have is along the lines of merch. So if
wow.
Yes. I'm wearing it right now, Alex. We've been hinting at it for a long time. We finally dropped it last week or the week after or the week before. This is finally the day we get to say you can come and buy some hats. And by that, I mean probably early next week, because Alex is still getting everything set up on the computers.
That's right. We have hats.
We have hats made by SJ, a friend of the pod, a friend of mine that I've known for several years. Hand-stitched, every single one by SJ.
That's right.
And
wow.
Each patch is also hand-stitched and handmade by SJ.
And if you are a Treemium member of this podcast, it's arbitrarypod.supercast.com. You will get early access and 20% off to these hats.
That's exactly right. So
how amazing is that?
Go find those when they come out. Check our all of our website. Check on all of our show notes on Instagram. You'll know when you can actually make that click happen.
Well, today, Casey, we're talking about the China-Fir, and let's imagine that you and I, oh my God, we're walking through a false China.
Actually, I have to say, that was me just being funny, Alex. It's the real China.
Okay, thank God.
Real China. This area of China, it's the Hunan province.
Yes, yeah. Man, what a beautiful place. Let's imagine we're there, Case.
Let's do it.
And neither of us speak the language, so that should be fun. And we come across some China-Fir. Casey, let's ID this tree.
Let's do it, Alex. So this is a tree that it stands out as soon as you see it. And you look at it, you see that it's a tall tree. It's got a conifer form with a single straight trunk. It has those excurrent branching patterns where the branches kind of come off left and right. It has that normal conifer shape to it. And the closer you get, the more you're like, that tree just kind of looks funny. It just has a certain shape to it that looks a little bit different.
Interesting.
And I can't really describe what it is about it.
Wow.
I have to sit down and just compare two different trees to say what's different about it.
A little bit of a bizarro world conifer.
Yeah, it's got some strange textual differences to it that I think make it.
Man.
I think a bizarro world, in a non-offensive sort of way, is a very accurate sense. You're used to the certain texture, and you go to a video game and you see they've made what is it, for all intents and purposes, a pretty realistic looking tree.
Sure.
Then you're like, okay, but I look closer and I realize, it's artistic. It's not an actual tree.
Yeah.
They didn't take a photorealistic thing.
Right.
That's what I feel about
Interesting.
this.
Okay.
It just looks like an artist's rendition of a tree in real life.
Weird. Yeah, I can see that. Also, spoilers, that comes down to the foliage and the cone.
Exactly.
Let's talk about them.
They're both unique. So it's an evergreen conifer, as we noted. It gets up to about 80 feet tall. I've heard of trees being 100 feet tall. Apparently one down in Sacramento is just about there.
The China-Fir?
Yes,
okay.
Correct. Yeah, so it's about 100 feet tall, is more or less the size that it's going to get. I have also read that the biggest one that anyone has measured recently, or at least heard about, is about 3 feet in diameter. So they get pretty reasonably sized, but they're not gargantuan old giant trees.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird because every one of their kin are kind of famous for doing that.
Interesting.
Because this is a tree that is in the cypress family.
Cupressaceae.
Though it doesn't look like it. We'll talk about that some other time.
A family of giants, I would say.
It's a family of giants. That's easily a fact. So Cunninghamia lanceolata is the name, and it is planted very often in kind of subtropical to like subtemperate kind of areas. So it only goes down to about zone 7, which means you can't plant it too far north. And it likes to grow in areas that are super temperate and delightful, but don't get too hot and don't really get too cold.
Okay.
It doesn't like to take like really droughty conditions. It wants some decent water. So the Great Pacific Northwest is like the exact spot that it loves to grow.
Oh, wow.
Other than, of course, its native area in like central China in the mountains where there's just lush water all over the place, huge big streams. It looks a lot like what you'd expect the Pacific Northwest to look like if we were like shifted down to Northern California. So
Interesting.
imagine the coast redwoods where it looks like it's this really cold, intense area, but it's pretty warm all the time, comparably speaking.
Yeah, pretty wet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Now, sometimes it ends up growing not perfectly with one stem, but has a couple different new stems that come up. And its bark is a classic Cupressaceae bark.
Yeah.
It's very like orange to kind of light darkish brown, and it's very fibrous. So it looks like you could just peel it apart like string cheese.
Yeah. Ooh, nice descriptor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now you're hungry, right? The other thing about this is that it will consistently sprout from the base. And I think this is also a reason that it tends to be multi-stemmed.
Interesting.
It is it's one of those rarities in conifers where usually you cut a conifer down, that's it, it's done.
Sure.
But the redwood is another example where as soon as you cut it down, it will sprout from the base and have a bunch of new sprouts that come up.
Will it also do that just when it's stressed?
I think so, yeah. It'll do
Okay.
it if the top dies back or there's any amount of stress, probably if you nick it with a, weed whacker or something like that.
Sure, yeah.
I've also seen it if sometimes it gets exposed or you plant it and as you're planting it, you kind of like are shuffling it around and something happens, then sometimes it just sends up new sprouts.
Okay.
But it's not like an apple or a cherry where once it starts sending up sprouts, you now have a hydra kind of happening.
Sure.
It'll just send up a few and you can clip them off and it's going to be fine.
Cool.
So as you're looking at it, you'll start to notice these textural differences. And like you said, Alex, it really comes down to these needles.
Yes.
It has these broad, long triangular, I think the term is isosceles, and they are extremely sharp. They're very flat and kind of like curl a little bit. They come off mostly in 2 ranks, but they don't really like do it to a T. They're kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of 2 ranked. Sometimes I'm not, whatever.
Yeah, I would describe these needles as like leaf-like, needle-like leaves.
They look a lot like Arbortrary, honestly.
Yes, totally. Yeah, they're very lanceolate. They look like little lanceolate leaves.
Exactly. Hence the name lanceolata.
That's right,
There you go.
Casey.
So this is very classic of these trees, and I think it's like you noted what gives them their weird texture. They just do not tend to grow in a nice, easy, just like I don't know. They just look different. It looks like a cypress tree with a pine tree's style needle or a fir tree's needle.
Yeah, it's a bit of a collage.
It is, and I think that's what makes it look so different and weird and strange. It also tends to grow this top that has like no significant needles or branches.
Oh, wow.
So it kind of, to me, at least the ones that I've seen around Portland, and I've noticed it elsewhere by these same traits, the bottom is a nice big full canopy, but then as it goes up, it immediately becomes very skinny and has like a spire-like top that lacks a bunch of needles.
Interesting.
So it just kind of looks like it's just ragged at the top, but I think it's normal. I think that's just what it grows like.
Okay, cool.
It's very weird.
Well, I'd love to chat about the cone.
Oh, let's do it, Alex.
This was like early on in the podcast. We were walking around and I was like just starting to kind of be interested in trees.
Yeah.
And I found a China-Fir cone. I was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
And you told me that's a China-Fir, my young boy. And
Yes, come.
I said, Papa, may I take it home, please?
You may.
And I put it on my little shelf here. I think eventually I just got rid of it.
Yeah,
but
it happens.
That's okay. There are more out there.
There are. And in fact, this very specific tree is on 26th Avenue, just along from Broadway, where we were stopping at the music store to get the cables we are recording on right now.
It's insane that you remember that, but very cool. But yeah, I just thought it was so curious. It was unlike any cone I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And I think that's still true. They are magnificent cones.
They are. They're gorgeous.
I love them.
They look like little fireballs to me.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's perfect.
Popping up. I think I've used this for a few different trees. I think Cryptomeria probably specifically. But they to me look like the hair on top of the Dragon Ball Z guy.
Yep.
Which is just like this big, huge poof of upright kind of flame-like scales.
Yeah, and they're very pointy scales.
Yes, they really are. And they kind
Love
of
that.
bend their way out at the very tip. So they kind of look like this almost like rosebud that just kind of like barely opens up.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful, like perfect light orange tan kind of color.
Botanically, they look more like a rosebud.
Yeah.
Or like a artichoke, like the head of an artichoke.
Now that is a great description. That's exactly right.
Cool.
I love that.
That's great.
And this is...
What are you looking at out there?
Oh, it's raining outside.
Oh, yes, it's raining.
Yeah, I was actually going to go to my mom's house and do some work today, but I don't know if I'll be able to.
Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, it's outside work. It is, yeah. It's this gorgeous... I think you're exactly right with artichoke. It's a perfect description. Now, the thing is that this is usually a kind of cone shape that you would not expect from this family of trees.
Totally, because as we all know, the Cupressaceae are more. We find a lot of peltate cones.
Exactly.
It's kind of their thing.
But this, they are terminal, so they grow at the ends of little teeny tiny shoots.
Yeah.
And there's usually, there's like one or a few together. Often I find them on the ground, but if you actually find them on the tree, there's usually one or two or three kind of popped out right next to each other. Mm-hmm. And they are maybe an inch and a half long. I think maybe you get to 2 inches on like a big one that's been doing a really good job on a very super healthy tree. But they're this that's about as big as they get. They're very circular, kind of oval. They look like you could fit them in your hand and just like cup them around. Mm-hmm. But they have like long scales. It looks a lot like the leaves because of course leaves and scales are all connected botanically way back when.
That's right.
So these little guys look like pine cones in a sense where I'm saying they have long scales that are linear, not peltate.
Yes.
And they appear, for all intents and purposes, as if they are spirally arranged around a central axis. Mm-hmm. And that is what makes them look like this. But when you actually do the botany on them, they have something that is uniquely in common with all other Cupressaceae, cypress family plants, which is they have a bract and a cone scale that are fused together. So you cannot tell the difference for at least most of the length of each of them.
Okay, cool.
So what that means is that for all intents and purposes, in Alois Farjan's book, The Natural History of Conifers, he essentially said in cypress families, there are no scales, there are only bracts. But it's really like, okay, it means that they're kind of like all smashed together at this point.
Scale bract.
Exactly.
It's a false scale.
And I should note, in the pine family, they actually have bracts that usually are very short, but on Douglas fir, it's very common. You can see it. You can see it on a bunch of firs.
Yeah.
You can see it on larches. So
it's
often...
kind of a little blanket covering the seeds.
Yes. Yeah. So often you can see it. There's always going to be two of them somehow or some way. But in the cypress family, those are fused together. It looks like there's just one.
Okay, interesting. If a cypress cone dries out, can you kind of peel off the bract, or is it botanically ingrained that it's like the same thing?
Exactly. They are all smashed together.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
They are the same thing.
So the fact that it looks pinish or furish, non-Cupressaceae-ish, is what makes it a false fir.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is indeed a cypress family tree.
Not only are you correct in that, they look like it because of the needles, they look like it because of the cone, but rather, when you do that really intense look, it turns out that most scientists who have done the cladistics on this, they find that not only is this board certified Cupressaceae, it is a basal member, i.e. the most, quote, primitive species in that entire family.
That's why it looks so funny.
Yes, because it's like ancient.
Yeah.
It is the most ancient. There's only maybe another species out there, only one more, so potentially 2 species. However, it is also likely, a lot of people have said, nah, this is just different varieties of one species that have been moved around and planted for forestry for, hundreds and thousands of years.
Okay.
So that's kind of still out there, but they know there's at least this one, and potentially more because they also have not done a whole lot of science on it. So they're thinking there might actually be some species that we just haven't really identified. So cryptic species that we just haven't done like really close analysis on.
Yeah. Ooh, fun.
Which is always fun to do when you have really weird old plants because everything's so weird and old about them.
Yeah,
right?
those have actually become sort of some of my favorite trees.
Really?
It's like you're sort of anachronist, ecologically anachronistic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then
ecological.
ecological acronism.
Oh, yeah.
That can work there. That means they're just out of place and time.
Yeah.
But,
Sure.
Yeah.
Those hangers on that are
Yeah.
like, I'm fucking old.
And I just have not done anything different for so
Yeah.
long. Yeah, which is so much of this Capriccaceae. It's such an ancient plant family.
If it ain't broke.
If it ain't broke, we're still going to grow.
If it ain't broke, we gonna grow. Okay. Casey. Well, that was her tree, the China-Fir. But boy, have we got a tale to tell.
Yeah, we do.
Is it a false tale?
No, this is all real.
Looking for bridges to build here.
Oh, well, you know what kind of bridge you should build?
What?
You should build a wind and rain bridge.
Wow, made of those materials?
Traditionally so, yes.
Okay, exciting. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and learn about some elemental engineering, it seems like. Right after this break, we'll be right back with Completely Arbortrary. Welcome back to Completely Arbortrary. China-Fir.
Yeah, you were just scratching your head as if you didn't know where we were going to go.
It's very like a cartoonish.
It was, yeah.
Monkey scratching the head.
I will say though, yeah, you got that completely wrong. We're not talking about whatever it is you said.
Elemental engineering, because you said bridges made of water and wind.
No. They are made. Sorry, I misheard you, Alex.
Well, that sucks.
That is the name of the bridge. They are not built of wind and rain.
You agreed with me.
It's because I thought you meant those materials, meaning of the trees.
Oh, interesting.
They are built of the trees.
Well, tell me more.
Traditionally speaking. So this is a tree that I've wanted to cover for a long time, but a lot of it is just like, yeah, we'll get to it.
Totally. This is one of those I saw on the docket, and I was like, we haven't talked about that? Wild. It feels like we have. Maybe
it does.
We brought it up in passing, I'm sure.
Exactly. I mean, it's been a cone of the month for years, and I think a lot of people assume if it's a cone of the month, we have covered it, yet 'tis not the case.
Yeah.
So it turns out that I was doing this tree. I was taking some pictures of it for the book, which is a very common theme for a lot of the things that we've done in the last year.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, okay, I got to do 2 things at once right now. How am I going to do that?
Ah, smart.
So I was actually taking a picture of this particular tree that we talked about earlier next to the music shop because it is the best example that I've seen in a long time. I know there's at least one more, but they're just like rare trees and they're not always planted right in the street so you can just get a good view of it. This one it's on the west side. You can just look at it. There's a street in front of it. There's no other street trees. It's a perfectly viewed tree.
Lovely.
As you noted, you can walk on the sidewalk and pick up a cone right there.
Yes.
So I was at this tree taking some photos and I was like, you know what? This would be a really good tree to cover. I'm just going to give it a quick Google. I'm going to see what it's about. And I learned a few things. One, that it's this basil member of the family.
Yes.
So I started looking a little into that and I was like, wow, that is a fascinating thing. And that explains, like you said, why this tree looks so weird. It's because it's got these ancient, primitive, in quotes, techniques that it's put into practice. And it just hasn't changed in a couple million years.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I found, now this is a story that comes from the citations, or rather I should say the remarks, of conifers.org. One of my favorite sites.
Your homepage.
And now normally they don't really go too far into like particulars, but in this, they have a really interesting kind of discussion that they talk about the ethnobotany of this tree and kind of how it was used in a certain culture in China for a certain period of time. And that was changed in 2006, 2008.
Ethnobotany.
Yes.
So it's like ethnicity botanical stuff?
Yeah, well, it's more just how it's used in culture, not
okay.
necessarily the botanical things,
Sure.
but how that tree relates to the people that use it.
Oh, great.
In a lot of ways.
Ethnobotany.
So, I was reading through this and I was like, what exactly is this? What are we talking about here? And it turns out that there is an ethnic group, one in China that is, I think, one of like 56 or so that are like officially recognized ethnic groups in China. So they are Chinese people, and they are the Kam or the Kam. I think mostly it's pronounced Kam, K-A-M.
Okay.
And they are a people who've been there for several thousand years. And in particular, they live in this central area. So the Hunan province in Guizhou province, Guangxi, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing all of these wrong. I'm just doing my best. So
Our
my
Chinese
apologies.
listeners are cringing.
I'm sure they are. Yeah. So this is like right there in the very center of China where it's not quite super cold. It's not quite super tropical. It's that semi-subtropical, semi-temperate kind of what I described, like I said earlier, kind of like the coast of Northern California, Southern Oregon.
Sure, okay.
So they have lived in this area and they have been doing agriculture and working with the land. And there's millions and millions of people here and they live in cities, but in particular, there are areas way out in the kind of rural spaces where they practiced forestry and agroforestry and had like all of their areas all beautifully connected. And this is what we usually term agroforestry, where there is forestry happening where you're managing the trees above, but then below you're using the ground area for some other kind of agricultural kind of thing.
What were we just talking about? There was a tree. I think it was maybe like a South American tree.
Oh, yes.
Was it Brazil nut?
Yeah, Brazil nut for sure, but I don't know if Brazil nut is quite. They just manage it in a wild forest.
There was a more recent one that was like, They had plantations of these trees, but beneath that they had like a sub-plantation of a different tree.
I think it was probably one of our tamarind or one of those other episodes where we talked about maybe the
ice cream
bean.
Yeah, that was it.
So, yeah, that's like, it's very classic for pea family because they put nutrients and they put nitrogen back in the soil.
So what do you find under these China-Fir?
So in this case, in central China, the Kam people were managing the forest and they had done it for many different years. Like it's very traditional, at the very first day of spring, fathers would take their sons out and they would go do things out in the forest and they would work on these trees. So underneath, they did a couple different things. One, they kept the land exactly in a working way so that all the water would go into the normal streams and it would all be clean and it would have the ecosystem services that forests provide. But then down lower in the valleys, there would be paddies filled with rice. And they would also have a fish culture where they would make ponds filled with fish. Then they would grow the fish and eat the fish.
Wow.
And often there would be other things inside the paddies as well. So the paddies are, to grow rice, it's essentially a big pond. Then the rice grows in the water and then up out of it. And that's how you grow rice. It's the very classic kind of tiered thing you see in China and all over Southeast Asia where you have tiered pools of water, and that's all rice paddies.
That's right. Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah. So this essentially, they need, clean water. You're growing your food in this water. So water would come through this forest, and then it would go into these paddies, and that would be filled with frogs and lizards and salamanders and fish. And they would also use the twine and a bunch of medicinal plants in the forest for their own use in their culture. So it wasn't like so traditional where you would have an agroforestry system that's very regulated and very regimented, where you'd say, right here is my crop of this, underneath these trees, over here is the crop of this, underneath these trees.
Yeah.
It was more that the trees were growing up and they were managing them in a sustainable way for hundreds and thousands of years. But underneath, they also had other things that they were doing and growing. So it was like a working forest that was half managed, half natural.
Sure, like the forest kind of managed itself.
Yeah.
But the people just like co-managed.
Exactly. And a funny thing about these trees, like we noted, they sprout if you cut them down.
Yeah, yeah.
So what they would do is they would go and cut off the bark in the early spring, like maybe 1.5 meters or so, 3 feet.
What do you call that? Making a ring around the...
Oh, it's called girdling.
Girdling.
Yeah.
Cool.
So they would girdle that tree.
Uh-huh.
And then they would leave it sitting there and just let the whole tree kind of dry out and die right on the stump. So they would let it kind of die standing up there, which means one thing, all the stuff that's heavy and filled with water starts to lose all the water and get lighter. And it would also just dry out on the stump, so you don't have to like move it somewhere else. You just let it kind of do it where it's standing.
Is there no fear of it falling down?
No, not at this point, because the base sprouts.
Sure.
So the root system is still alive.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah.
So you girdle that main stem, and then it maybe sprouts the next year or that summer with new sprouts at the base. So the tree starts to regenerate itself immediately.
Wow.
Then they would come by in spring or in the next fall. They'd cut the tree. They would debark it, and they'd use the bark for roofing. They'd use it for fire. They use it for kind of shelter of lots of different things. Then the logs would go down into these kind of upper mountainous stream river kind of things, and then they would move them down to a larger river, They'd turn them into a raft, and then they would take them down into market, which is just, essentially rafting these logs every month or so throughout all of summer and all of fall into the city below, where everyone really wanted all of this wood.
Wow.
It is easily worked.
Yeah.
It's rot resistant. It does not get eaten by termites.
Oh, wow.
So it's like the perfect wood for using for literally anything you need to use that kind of wood for. It's
especially in that temperament.
Yes, where there's it's
temperament.
You're thinking I just completely in my brain I was like, I know what he was trying to say.
Yeah.
And I moved on. In that environment, like that temperate
that climb.
climb. Thank you. Yeah, where everything's like very easily rottable,
Yeah, totally.
Like it's
wet and like
moist and it's wet and it has just the right temperatures. It's like, yes, this is where fungus thrives.
Lots of insects.
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, it's one wood that's just like, again, so old where it's like, I got everything put into place where I'm not going to get eaten. I'm not going to get killed. I'm set.
What a good guy.
Yeah, right? It's a great tree to have around.
Seriously.
So they would run this kind of system, and it was this very culturally famous thing. I brought up that bridge that I talked about earlier.
Yes, the bridge made of water and wind.
Exactly.
My favorite Avatar: The Last Airbender episode.
It really is. It's the best one for sure. Well, give that a quick Google, Alex.
Okay, what am I Googling?
You Google wind and water bridge. And everyone out there, do the same dang thing.
Cheng Yang.
Yeah, do you see it? And go to Google Images and look at those amazing bridges.
It looks like a Chinese Tower of London.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly how I described it. Like you literally took the words out of my mouth.
Wow.
It's like this bridge that is constructed over a river, but it has the very classical kind of Chinese pagoda style, like layered architecture.
Yeah.
And
kind of at the columns, above the columns.
And then like in between as well. So it looks like this long, interesting, beautiful building, which is just going across a river.
I mean, this was definitely a thing in early, I want to say like middle age cities.
Yeah,
a bridge would be like a market.
Yeah, you could sit there on the bridge. Like it would be a place.
And there would be like buildings on the bridge.
And a lot of this is where they would go during like storms and things like that. Like this is a bridge that they would say, yes, it can withstand all these things. And it also is protected and kind of away from other things. It would just be this important place.
Wow, cool. It's gorgeous. Oh my God.
Yeah. They also built what's called drum towers. And way back when, this was a drum tower, or it was a tower that was built very first thing in the village. They would put a big drum in it, so then they would hit the drum if someone was coming in, or they were invaded, or they just needed the villagers to know some important thing.
An alarm system.
Yeah, exactly. And then it became later like a meeting place and this kind of cultural center of villages. And a lot of these things were ruined and destroyed or fell into disrepair after the Cultural Revolution in China in the 80s, I think it was. You familiar with this at all, Alex?
Not really, no case.
Well, the quick version is communism came in and said, we need to turn ourselves into a modern a modern new economy, which is what famously China has been doing for a very long time. And they essentially said in a very, I'm a communist controlled country now, if you do not have the right culture, then we are going to force you to have the right culture.
Wow. Okay. So a forced turn away from traditional Chinese ways of life.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. And that is just, everyone understand, that is a 10,000 foot description that we can do in 30 seconds.
Don't sell yourself. Casey's a Chinese history expert.
Yes, I speak fluent Chinese, all the dialects from all the different groups.
Okay. So, oh man, that's so depressing.
Yeah, it is. And so there's a lot that has been lost because of that, but it's not 100% gone, but a lot of the buildings, like, they're just not the way they used to be.
Yeah, or not upkept.
Yes, upkept. Correct. Alex. Gotta start enunciating things more. I like that.
The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain. The bridges in China are not upkept.
That's very good. Yeah, you gotta do that before every single one of our shows now. So at the end of the day, this kind of was these trees were used for these very traditional things, and they were managed in a very traditional way, and had been up until about 2006.
2006.
And they did this, and this is more particular, and this story is just why I thought it was interesting. It's like the only time in this on this website that I found like a very particular story about a very, very particular group of people in a very particular place that did agroforestry in this particular way that then got destroyed because of something that I don't know that I've talked about a whole lot on this show that I absolutely am very passionate about. Dams. I don't like dams, Alex.
Dams, those damn.
Thank you.
Then you should be happy about the news down in, what was it, Southern Oregon?
Yes, the Klamath River.
Yes.
I've been following that very closely, in fact. Yeah. I'm very happy about that.
Big win.
It is a huge thing that I am just very passionate about. And I don't know why. I don't know where it came from. It just is something that I started learning about and was like, oh my God, this is horrific.
Yeah.
I listened to a podcast by OPB. It's under their Timber Wars kind of subsection, which is another great podcast you should certainly listen to. But this is called Salmon Wars. And it's all about how the U.S. government, surprise, destroyed indigenous culture and indigenous rights on the Columbia River in particular.
Okay.
So go listen to that. I cannot do it justice in terms of the situation there.
I think basically the only thing I know about dams is very surface level.
Yeah.
Which is that they generate electricity. And they fuck up the ecology of wherever they are.
There you go. That's as good as you got to get.
It is insane once you start to really think about like the ramifications of building a giant block in the middle of a river.
Yeah. It's the scale of the impact and how it affects in particular salmon.
Yeah.
Salmon and the cultural significance of salmon for the Pacific Northwest.
Sure.
And I mean like anywhere that touches the Columbia River and any river that touches the Columbia River. Yeah. Which is a gigantic amount of space.
Most rivers, yeah.
It's like literally almost everything until you hit the Rockies kind of thing. And, aside from the Great Basin. So the Snake River, which runs all the way to Yellowstone National Park, that river drains into the Columbia. It drains most of Idaho.
Holy shit.
A bunch of plains areas in Oregon and Washington. And then the Columbia River goes all the way up from BC throughout central Washington, and the Willamette River and all the tributaries from it all the way up to Portland, where all those rivers kind of come together. And the Snake River comes into the Columbia way, way out east.
Okay.
So that entire huge, gigantic watershed, the Columbia River Basin, for all intents and purposes, there used to be salmon that would run all the way through that and come from the ocean and go all the way up through the Snake River, and there'd be salmon in the middle of Idaho, Lewiston, Idaho, which now famously has the furthest inland port because of the dams on the Snake and Columbia rivers.
Oh my God.
So way back when, Celilo Falls was this big, important falls on the Columbia River around the Dalles, which again, go listen to the episode. The whole river itself is so vastly different. It's hard to imagine what it used to look like. It was a raging torrent.
It's also big, right?
Yeah, huge.
Yeah.
Like the size of the Columbia River as a raging torrent going over massive waterfalls.
Wow.
Could you imagine that?
No.
It's crazy. So anyway, all this to say, the U.S. government said, we're going to build this, and ended up destroying just so many very important cultural things and destroyed the salmon run for the last essentially 80 years or so. So there's no more salmon that run anywhere where it used to. And these people that have lived here for thousands of years depended on this. Like that is in the treaty rights. So I'm all for dam removal in every possible way. In fact, I have said this and I shouldn't say it here, but when the apocalypse happens and there's no more government control, the first thing that I'm going to be doing is just getting rid of every dam I set my fingers on.
You can see Casey out there with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, just
one
bashing
stone
away.
at a time.
They're never going to allow me to get close to Bonneville Dam anymore. They're like, whoa, sir, we've heard what you've said. So I was reading through and I was like, oh, this is interesting. I want to read about this agroforestry that they're using this Cunninghamia, this China-Fir for. And then it turns out that the only reason this is covered here, Alex, is because they did a UNESCO-funded research into the culture of this particular village that had done this kind of agroforestry for at least hundreds of years, very likely more like thousands, before they really said, yeah, this is what we do. It's just, those people that live up there, they cut trees and bring them to market. So it turns out in the early 2000s, the Chinese government said, hey, we're going to build a dam here for hydroelectric, and that is that.
Wow.
And this village had been doing this kind of stuff like I described earlier. They had all these very particular ways that they worked within the environment, and it was a very traditional way of life happening in the 21st century.
Yeah.
And they are now literally completely underwater. So the trees that are higher up, yes, those are still there, and you can go and they're still logging. There's, a lot of different trees around, and there's co-ops that own it. So the forestry in this area is not completely gone. But this one particular group of people that had been doing this in a very particular way for a very particularly long time, as I've said before, just completely gone away for a gigantic reservoir that's now completely inundated everything that they've lived in and is now producing hydroelectricity. So that's great. You were producing clean, renewable energy, but at what cost?
Yeah, that's supremely fucked up.
It is, and it just really makes me sad.
This shit.
I just do not support dams in a way that I used to, because I was with you thinking, hey, yeah, you know what? This is a great opportunity to get hydroelectric energy. But it absolutely destroys this ecosystem that used to be there, that was developed over millions of years. So anyway,
can I just say, like, this kind of stuff, I think of everything we talk about, all the big motifs of this podcast, the destruction of like wholesome traditional ways of doing things in conjunction with nature, in companionship with nature. The destruction of that for like this big dumb solution that fucks up so much shit, but also the shareholders are sitting pretty.
Yeah, it's a sledgehammer that solves a problem, when it's like, well, maybe a more delicate approach could like not do so much damage.
It's like taking a sledgehammer to like an ant on your living room floor and like creating a big hole that falls into your basement. You're like, nah, I got rid of that ant.
Yeah, ant's taken care of.
And I just like, it's so depressing. It's like, I don't know. You were describing that method that they used, to like the whole process.
Yeah, take the bark off, cut it down. A couple months later, all that. Yeah,
and it's also like logical.
Yeah, all done by hand too.
Yeah, it's also logical, and it's also you're describing it. I'm like, yeah, of course. Like that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
and it's like peaceful.
Yeah,
it's a peaceful way to treat our habitat. And then the dams come in. It's like this brute. It's like so violent,
Yeah, I see.
It just really gets me down, Case.
It is, yeah. This is how I feel with dams now. Like it's been a very intense process. I think probably since I watched Damnation. I actually got to thank my old roommates up in Seattle for putting that on.
Wow.
But yeah, that is. I think, Alex. I think you're right. That it does have this overarching brute mentality to it, where it is this gigantic thing that affects everything at such a large scale and is so irreversible, as opposed to a gentler kind of like, yes, I'm going to do this one thing to this one particular like section of forest, this exact tree. And
it's so not
very
thoughtful.
Like, yeah. I think that's right. That's a very good description. And they describe that a lot in this this big photo series and some reports that I read, where they talked a lot about the fact that there was not a lot of planning that went into it. So, like, roads were built above where the area is and just destroyed a bunch of farm areas and fields and stuff like that. Just like, yeah, we're going to put the road there. And then no one thought through how that was going to affect everything around it. You know?
Wow. I mean, and it also feels like we are accelerating that kind of behavior. But also there have been some recent, big wins for nature and for the people, that want to take care of it. And
there has been, but not enough, I don't think.
Not enough, no. Yeah. But it's just enough to keep me. I just have this little glimmer, this little flicker of hope in me.
Yeah.
But mostly, I'm kind of resigned. I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, doing this podcast, I'm sure does not help. Like, it's a nice way for us to learn about all these things. I mean, we're a tree podcast, yet we're here talking about dams for at least the second time, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And it's that connection of how, this tree is connected to all these other things, and then you realize like, wow, oh my gosh, so this dam ends up connecting all these other different things and having these larger ramifications. It really is. I think it helps put it into perspective, and it's one of those things you can be like, huh, interesting. But then you think about it in that, I think where you're approaching it right now, kind of in a moral way, and you're like, man, that just doesn't seem to jive.
Yeah,
I see how it makes sense in terms of like the dollars and like the cold, hard spreadsheet of it all. But it doesn't account for all the other things that get impacted.
Totally. I mean, like, it's so tired at this point to say, like, we are a capitalistic nation. We are a capitalistic world.
Yeah.
This is the way that capitalism treats nature. It's a resource. They don't give a shit. As long as they make money and pass the money down to their children, they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit.
What don't they give, Alex? Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, it's so maddening. But anyway, we got to take a break. Hey, we'll be right back to rate the China-Fir.
I feel like Alex is like pulling out a cigarette. Anyway, we got to take a break. I got to take a break.
I'm going to go walk around the block. We're going to give a review to this wonderful tree. We got to do so after a quick break. We'll be right back with Completely Arbortrary. Welcome back to Completely Arbortrary. That was our discussion of the China-Fir. China-Fir, whoa, China-Fir.
Hey, that's pretty good, Alex. You gonna write that song?
You know that song?
No.
China Grove by Doobie Brothers.
Oh, I do know that song.
It's a great one. Yeah. And now we got to give a rating to this damn tree. Here's how it works. We're going to give some final thoughts on it and give it a rating of 0 to 10 golden cones of honor. Casey, as our resident expert, will begin with you.
Well. I think, Alex, that I'm happy to start because I think that this tree is something special.
Wow.
Now, I don't mean that it's something special because it's used in a very interesting cultural way, or that it is interesting because of the things that it's built. I think this tree is interesting because of its historical primitiveness. I think it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then I move on, and then I see it out in the actual, I was going to say forest, but I've never seen it in the forest. I've only seen it in the city of Portland, really.
Sure.
Actually, I also saw one on the coast one time. But it's one of those trees that every time I see it, I think to myself, go, sweet, look at that. I love that tree.
Totally.
I just think it's great.
It's a treat.
It is a treat in every way. And I usually go out of my way to go look at the tree whenever I pass by it. But it's not especially common. It is not, it's not rare. So like, you can find it pretty often without much trouble. And it is a tree that I think is just spectacularly interesting looking. Like it's got all these very curious characteristics that make me just love it.
Wow.
But you can't hug it. I mean, you can if it's big enough and, it's got like a nice stem.
Sure.
But otherwise, it's just too pokey. It's very uncomfortable to be around. They're not comfortable trees to just walk through like maybe a Douglas fir would be or a hemlock or something. But they're just a fascinating tree.
By the way, kind of a funny, because, it's a false fir.
Yeah.
And firs are famously friendly.
Yes, that is very true.
So it's going to trick you. It's going to make you think it's friendly, and then it's going to bite you.
Exactly. It's gonna be like, no, I am not a true fir.
Yeah.
And I think that is interesting, Alex.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to give this tree a 9.2.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm going for it. Because
how about that?
I think it's just super cool. I just think it's an amazing, amazing tree.
Well done.
Yeah. So this is what I think.
9.2.
It's just so interesting and so curious.
Yeah. Lovely. Great score, Case. Well.
What do you think, Alex? I notice you over there with your wheels turning.
Yeah. Not even gears, just wheels.
Yeah, just gears.
Gliding up against each other, not getting anything done.
Not just...
I got a broken belt. Maybe that's my problem. I like the China-Fir. I like it a lot. It's a beautiful tree. Mm-hmm. I think I think it's more fascinating than beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just cool.
Yeah, all right, man.
It's like a celebrity who's like not traditionally attractive, but they're so interesting and unique that they're like really hot.
Interesting. I've heard this about the guy who does the bear. The bear of the bear.
Sure, yeah. Alan something. Yeah, I just think it's really interesting. I love the story you told about the agroforestry. Mm-hmm. What do you call it? Traditional agroforestry?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. Yeah. But it doesn't really grab me, I think, in the way it grabs you.
Oh no.
But I will be giving this tree, I'm going to say 8.5 golden cones of honor.
8.5. Yeah. That's a pretty good score for something that doesn't grab you.
Yeah. I want, whenever you give a 9+, I want to go there with you. But I'm just not going to today. But an 8.5 is nothing to shake your nose at. It's a great score.
As we say, Alex, your cones are your own. Including ones that look like pine family cones, but are in fact cypress family cones. Those are also yours.
Thank you. Yeah. All of that is officially in parentheses next to the phrase, your cones are your own.
It is. Our sticker is really odd. It's really like, it doesn't look great, but we have to include it.
Well, that was our review of the China-Fir. We hope you loved it. Casey.
Alex, is this the time that we go to our Treemium and we look for a question in our Ask Me Anything section?
That's right.
Excellent.
I have selected a question for this week's AMA.
Okay.
This week comes from Max. If you could only plant one tree across America, which tree would it be?
Oh.
I'm thinking for beauty, posterity, utility, adaptability, cost, and of course, the environment.
Wow.
So a tree for all seasons, a tree for all places, Casey. Casey has no idea.
That's a lot.
What I imagine is like we just broke open the dam in your mind and you're flooded
too many ideas.
With ideas. Of course,
okay.
We have to make this somewhat timely.
Yeah, all right. I'm checking my watch.
Yeah,
all right.
set a timer for yourself or something. But I want to say I've got my answer.
Okay, what's yours? Yeah, I can't believe you thought about that quick.
Bradford pear. I just think that'd be so funny.
Just an ecological terrorism, just to laugh about later.
We put it on a coin, We have a big got milk kind of ad campaign for the Bradford pear, and we plant them all. And
trucks just driving by throwing seeds out.
Yep, and then the next everyone's like, yeah, great, yeah, and then next spring. We're coming cold.
We're coming cold. You make me sick, Alex. You make me sick.
I think it would be a lot of fun. Hey, we need a little humor in this nation, Yes, this is a way to shed once and for all our puritanical origins.
I see. Okay, I see.
And make a sex-positive nation. Everywhere smells like jizz. Also, I feel like the Bradford pear isn't a terrible choice for utility and
yeah, I guess it's probably got nice wood.
It's a fine street tree.
It sucks as a street tree. There's better. Okay, yeah. Alex is like, yeah, like I said, whatever. Okay. All right. Well,
I think that's my final answer. Thank you. And I'm assuming you're already thinking about like median longitude
yes.
and
I'm
what tree would do well in all zones.
Yes, I am thinking about that, which there are no good answers. That's for sure.
Sure. We're looking for a close approximation.
Yes. So I'm gonna go with a tree. So okay, first, can we get some things that we can just like write down real fast?
Sure.
Okay, so posterity, right? This is what we have. So we want a tree that's going to live for maybe 100 years at minimum. So you leave something here for people in the future to see. So or to use or to have. So posterity means it has to have some kind of staying power.
Got it.
So that puts me on like a longer lived tree. So alders, willows, cottonwoods, they're off.
No,
can't do them. And then what was for the environment, right?
Yeah.
So that means it can't be a tree that's going to be causing an ecological damage like the tree of heaven. And honestly, the Bradford pear can't be that.
Cost
can't be that.
Is another factor.
Cost. So it has to be a tree that's going to grow very well, and that's not going to cost a lot to grow from seed or to keep up or to take care of. So like a Douglas fir is a great example of something like that.
Because remember, we're doing a huge nationwide ad campaign.
Yeah.
This is the new Smoky Bear.
This is big.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to plant this tree. And then it was for what was a couple other things?
Adaptability, utility are the other two.
Okay, so that honestly, right off the bat, first thing that comes to mind is a chestnut.
Oh, wow. This is great for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
We're bringing back the chestnut.
Yes.
The American chestnut.
This is that campaign also.
Huge research. I mean, this is like...
But here's the thing. I don't think it should be the American chestnut.
Interesting.
That's
not gonna go well with the voters, Casey.
It's not gonna go well for the voters, but the American chestnut
chestnut.
This is the freedom chestnut. So this is there are very rare examples of a big, gorgeous American chestnut.
Okay.
They just don't exist anymore. They have a disease. So that is not going to be a good option because it's just going to die. It also turns out their nuts are actually kind of small. We want ones that have big chestnuts.
Big nuts.
Big nuts on them trees.
Bradford pear.
So I think that it would be a hybrid of the Spanish and American chestnuts.
Oh, wow.
And they have a bunch of different hybrids, and there's a bunch of different chestnuts, so I think you can probably come up with a few different options. I'll smash those together and create a hybrid chestnut that grows well everywhere. It has a resistance to the blight. It grows very well. Like they will plant themselves in by seed here in the Pacific Northwest. They will grow from the Mississippi all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean, from Canada down to Georgia.
Okay.
So that covers a huge breadth of places. I bet you that you could plant most of them somewhere in like the less extreme places in the kind of Intermountain West and probably in Northern California. So I think that the adaptability of it could be increased even more with a little bit of breeding.
Okay.
So I think we could get a tree that can be planted just about everywhere.
I like this, Casey. I'll also say chestnuts are, for some reason, I see them as very like American trees.
Yeah, they quintessentially were.
Yeah.
Like they were the tree. They were the redwood of the East is what they called them, right?
Sure, yeah. Wow, I like this. I like this a lot.
Yeah.
You know what? We can go with chestnut, but I think it should be in one of those like tiered agroforestry things where for every chestnut we plant, we have to plant a Bradford pear.
Somewhere else as a beauty spot to the chestnut that has flowers that are horrible. I'm okay with that.
Lovely. Thank you, Max, for your question. That was a fun one. And if you've got a question to grab our attention, become a Treemium member today. arbitrarypod.supercast.com. As the weather starts to depreciate a little bit, you're going to be inside more potentially if you're normal. Or if you're like Casey, who's going to go camping.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for this to get over.
It's a great time of year to catch up on all of the ad-free listening and the fun bonus episodes and ask a couple questions and interact a little bit. And it also is the best way to support this podcast that you love so very much. arbitrarypod.supercast.com. Completely Arbortrary Treemium. Casey Clapp.
Alex Crowson. Remember at the very beginning I told you I got a little secret I'd share?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I have a bunch of tattoos on my right hand here.
You sure do.
All different kinds of cones.
His arm.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
His arboretum.
Yes, my arboretum, correct. Yeah. So I'm in a moment now where I can kind of take a breath, and I was like, you know what? I need to get a couple more tattoos.
Nice.
I haven't got a tattoo in years now, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm going to I'm going to move down past the wrist, which I have never done.
No kidding.
And I believe I'm going to get China-Fir.
Awesome, Casey.
Right on the back of my palm.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Right across all those
All
tendons
those
and veins.
tendons and bones. Yep.
That's great, Case.
Anyway,
China-Fir.
I've thought about it for a long time, but I was like, you know what? China-Fir, it doesn't really have anything. Like, I don't have a connection with it. And then I was like, I don't really have a connection with any of these trees except for the dogwood. That's the only one that's even remotely unique.
Like an emotional connection.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's just this kind of tree that, I really liked, thought had a cool cone. So I was like, great, I'm going to get that one. But then after doing some research for it and thinking about it a lot, and really, I'm like, yeah, actually, this tree's pretty cool.
That's a great idea, Casey.
So,
congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm going to reach out to my tattoo artist, Sean. So if you're listening, Sean, you're going to get a message from me soon.
Yeah.
And on top of that, if you guys are all looking to get tattoos, go to Bloodroot Tattoo. Sean Hebrink.
Sean Hebrink, yeah.
Great folks. Love him to death.
Great artist, and you have a lot of his work on your body.
I sure do.
Well, thank you, everybody, so much for listening to this episode of Completely Arbortrary. We're glad to be back, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
See you later.
Completely Arbortrary is produced by Alex Crowson and Casey Clapp. Our artwork is by Jillian Barthold, and our music is by Aves and the Mini Vandals. If you want to support this podcast and become a Treemium member, head over to arbitrarypod.supercast.com. Thanks for listening.